Hey everyone. So in this lab introduction, I'm going to basically talk you through all of the instructions for our first lab. So that way, when you get to the actual questions themselves, you are ready to go and jump in. So basically what you need to have in order to get started with this lab is you need to have Stata downloaded using the software.uvm.edu link. And then you need to have it installed and loaded up on your computer. If you have a Mac like me, it will look something like this. If you have a PC, it might look something more like this, but the experience will generally be the same except for keyboard shortcuts. You will also need a data file, which you can access here by just clicking on it, and this will download it to your computer and store it in your downloads folder. And you might want to move it over to your lab folder, which we'll talk about in a second. So when we have Stata open, scrolling down here so you can see it in the PC, you're going to see something that has a whole bunch of windows. The most important one for us right now is what's called the command window. And you can see this is where you type things and you enter it and then Stata reads it. So it's how you communicate and talk to Stata. Stata cannot be communicated with in general English. It will tell you that your command is unrecognized. It will also give you a little error code, in this case R199, and you can always click on that to get more information about the error that you have created. Stata will seem finicky, but it's very consistent. So if something is wrong, it will always be wrong. If something is right, it will always be right. If something is being mysterious, there's a typo somewhere, and it may be driving you crazy. So what we do with Stata is we type commands. I'm going to give just a basic command. This is DI for display, and it gives me the number, like a calculator. Or you can write hello world, and it will give you hello world. You can even change the color, which I think is nice, if I want to make sure that I see something because I'm debugging or something like that, and it will make it red for you. So all of those things come out in the results window. There are also two other important windows, the variable tab, which is where you can see all the variables in your data file. And we can also click over here to see our history window, and you can single click on those to restore the command back into your command window, and then you can re-enter it. Or you can copy directly out. And I'm just right-clicking here to select this option and then implement those choices. You can also, if you have a whole bulk of text, you can copy, right-click, and you can save all or copy however you want. So it's pretty versatile there. And then there's some properties menu that has some additional information about your data set and the variables that you're working with. Right now, we're not working with any, but we will, and that's what their information here will be for. Other things that will show up are these items at the top. So one of them is just data editor. This is to view, that's why there's a magnifying glass. This is to edit. Here you literally can go in and you can enter data. This is a horrible idea. You should never do it, but you can. We can also view our data, and this can help us kind of understand what we're working with. I've accidentally made a variable, so I'm going to type clear, and that just clears the memory. The first thing that we are going to be working with is setting up a log file. So the log file will record everything that we do. And in a way, everything is recorded here, but one, when I close Stata, this vanishes. And two, I don't have the output here. And so a log file will capture both of those things. One thing to note is that Stata works with one file at a time, and Stata operates in one session at a time. So once you close Stata, if I actually exit it, it's gone. The memory is erased. Anything I have not saved in a file will not be there when I get back. So I'm going to open Stata back up. Now we're back. You can see fresh start. Everything is gone. History is erased. So that's why we want to use log files to track the work that we did. There are three ways we can open a log file. The first is we can literally click on the log button. There we go. And we can begin. And we can begin our log, and we can type the name of our log. So ECON3500 lab 1. I recommend using .log as the suffix, or down here, you can do it here, log. You can use this one, the formatted log. This will look very nice in Stata. It's a little nicer formatted, but you can only really open it in Stata in a usable way. It will look really funny in text editors, but a log file looks very versatile and can work in any sort of thing you want to open it up in. So less pretty, more versatile, you can take your pick. Once I've run this command, I've started my log. The other way that I can do this is I can go up to my file and I can start a log from here. This is basically doing the job of the buttons. I can also stop my log by typing log close, and this closes the log. All right, and then what I can do is I can go to this location. I go to my Dropbox and I can see the name and I can open it up and I'll see a list of all the commands that I ran between when I opened it and when I closed it. Now, if I want to do it again, I can also append the existing log. I can start a new log. I can also just use this command. So I'm literally copying and I'm pasting that command. And then because I want to replace it, I can type comma replace. So that tells it, go to this log, use this log, start using this log, but get rid of the old stuff. I don't want it anymore. If you want to keep working, you can append. And then it will just add on to the bottom, so it'll get longer and longer. So this could be useful if you do half your lab, you stop, you leave and go back. You can also suspend it, and there's other options here, and you can see the options here as well. For suspend and resume, if you just want to pause your log for a little bit, that's also okay. So that's the first thing that's important background. And the second thing is going to be working directories. So what you can see here is that I just threw this log in Dropbox because that seemed like a good place to go. This is not actually my working directory. If I just did this log using ECON3500 test log, so we're going to find me, right? We had to find this log. It's not going to put it where I left it because I didn't tell it to put it there. It's going to put it in my working directory. And if I'm using Stata and I'm not explicitly looking for it, I may not know where my log file is because I may not know where my working directory is, right? I can go back to Dropbox and be like, where did it go, right? Technically here, it's told me where it's working, and my working directory is somewhat bizarrely this other project folder from the last time I was using Stata. This is not a good place to put our econometric stuff. You can also see on a Mac, maybe a PC, you can see it down here as well, what your working directory is. If you ever want to check your working directory, you can type pwd, and it will display your working directory for you. So what I want to do is I want to have a directory that's useful to me. So I'm going to make one called ECON3500 and lab, and I'm going to want my stuff in here, and I want this to be my working directory. So I can either manually type this, and I'm going to type CD for change directory, and then I'm going to start typing the name. I'm going to put this in quotation marks, because if there's any spaces in the file path, you will need quotation marks. If you don't have any spaces, then you don't actually need the quotation marks. You can do this. This is fine. This is Dropbox. This is ECON3500. This is labs. We'll see if I remembered this right. It was not right because it's lab. There we go. And now I've changed my working directory. I can check. This is where it is. So if I do, I'm going to copy this. I'm just using copy, and then I'm pasting it. I'm closing my log. I'm opening my log. It's going to save it right in that directory, and I can see it over here. So that's really handy. It's important that we know where our working directory is and we set it. In terms of finding out where this is, if you don't intuitively know how to type where your working directory is, that's totally okay. Often the menu bars will show you where it is. What I do if I use a Mac, you'll have to look up the shortcut on a PC, is that if I right click, that's a right click to show this menu, and I hold down the Option key, it will give me this, copy this location as a path name. And then if I paste it here, you'll see I get the full path name here. And so if I need to do it that way, I can just get rid of this, put some quotations, and do that. So that's another way to get those out, and there's an equivalent way in a PC. So I recommend always working in the file, declaring your working directory, and knowing where things are and keeping it in one place, because that will make your life easier, better, etc. So the next thing we need to do then is open our data set. So I clicked on my data set and I downloaded it. It went somewhere. I'm going to click on this little finder, and you can see I actually have a bunch of these because I like this data set. So it's over here. You can also just double click and open Stata, but then again, you're not aware of where your working directory is and things can easily get lost. So what I would do is I would copy your file. I would go into your directory and I would paste the file. So everything's in the same place, in the same working directory, the working directory that you are using in. So we can open this file, 1, by double clicking, 2, by going to File and Open, and then selecting the data. Notice that when we do this, it actually gives us the command. Or we can just type, because we're in the right folder, the right working directory, I can just type use driving 2004. And I recommend typing clear afterwards. What this does is if there's any data that you've been using or made changes to, it gets rid of it and replaces it with just this new data set. One thing to keep in mind here is that Stata can only open one file at a time. And so you're going to want to keep that in mind when you're working with your data. Now, once this is open, you're going to see a whole bunch of variables appearing in this window. And these are the variables we're going to work with, which is some data on laws, fatalities, in states from 1980 to 2004 with laws around drinking and speed limits. So it's a very cheery data set. If we want to get a sense of our data, we can type describe. And it will give us information with the characteristics of our data. It will tell us its name, its storage type, its format, and its variable label. And so this will often give us information about the data. One thing that's fun about Stata is that you can abbreviate commands so long as it's unique. So instead of typing describe, I can just type des, and it will do the same thing. If I type d, it will also do the same thing. So that's really useful. The other thing to note is that if I want to call one of these variables, I can type the name, like d totfat, total fatalities, or I can type d space, and then I can just double click or click on this little button, boop, and it just pops it right in. So I don't have to waste time typing if that's a pain. You can also see here the information. So I can see information about this variable, the one that I've selected. See, as I selected, it changes down here, and you can see information about my data set. This is the data I'm using. This is the number of variables and observations. This is how much memory it's used, and this is how it is sorted. I also find it very useful to browse and look at my data sometimes. If you're very comfortable, you don't necessarily need to do this, but I like to even when I am really comfortable. So I'll click on this button, the browse button, or I will literally type browse. And when I browse, it gives me essentially what looks like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheets of all my data. And I can see it, and each one has a number and each one has an observation. And this can be really helpful so I can get a sense of how the data is loaded. I'm going to close that. And again, with abbreviations, you can just type browse. And you can also browse just one variable or a few variables at a time. All of these are options. Sometimes we have a lot of variables and we don't know what we're looking for. So a few things we can do. We can type look for alcohol. This will give me a variable that has alcohol in the name or in the label. And so that way I can find my alcohol variables. You can also tabulate and look at variables in more detail. So for example, I can tab, this is short for tabulate, back 10. And this will give me a short frequency table of the distribution so I can see what they are. I can get more information about this by typing help tab, and I can see a lot of documentation for a one-way tabulation of all these other things that we work with. The last thing I want to talk about is making new variables. So these are the variables that came with the data set. They have labels, they have values, but we can also change and manipulate the data set through commands. So for example, I can create a new variable using what's called the generate command. And the variable is going to show up at the very bottom of my list of variables, unless I tell it otherwise. So I'm going to type gen, short for generate, high fatal equals fatal rate greater than 1.5. I've spelled this wrong, so that's something to try again. Let's try this one. So sometimes if you make mistakes, Stata will help you until you get it right. So this generates a variable equal, and this is confusing. This is a variable equal to 1 if this is true and 0 if it is false. We can see this by tabbing high fatale, the two things. This makes a two-way frequency test. Now this is a horrible table. This is impossible to read. It looks very bad. I can expand this by just dragging it, and I can rerun it and it'll fill more. But the other thing I can do is I can just swap these two. And now I have a nice frequency table that shows me that these are equal to 1 over here and then over here. So these are low fatality, these are high fatality. And then here we have the total number, 27 states with low, 21 at high, and 48 states total in our data. So this gives us a lot of options. We can play with the tabulate more. We can do things like tab. We can also pull up previous commands. If I'm using a Mac, I can hit function up and I can cycle through previous commands just like you might if you're comfortable with terminal. And I believe there's also a keyboard shortcut for that. And I can also add options, like I could add a row, so it tells me the row percentages, or I could add a column and it tells me the column percentages, or I could do both. Again, this is beyond the scope of what I need you to do. I'm just kind of showing you some options. The other way that you could do this is you could generate a variable, gen high fatale. I'm just going to call it high fatale 2. And I'm going to say make this variable equal to 1 if, I've forgotten this name, so I'm just going to click on it, is greater than 1.5. So what this does is this will create a variable equal to 1 if this is greater than 1.5, but it will be missing if not. So it will generate these missing variables. We want to look out for those. So what this tells me is that this variable is equal to 1 for these folks, but it's missing, so we can't do anything with it. So what I might do then is I might replace high fatale 2 equals 0 if tot fat PVM per vehicle mile is less than 1.5. And then this tells me the 27 changes have been made. And I can see now I have created the variable. So I've done this in a two-step way. This might be a little bit more intuitive. If you want to do other sorts of things, greater than or equal to, or statements and statements, I have a whole list of the ways that we can work through these and some examples up here in the lab. I'm going to stop here. I think this covers the basics, and I think I'll get too excited if I keep talking, but feel free to reach out to me or reach out to Ray if you have questions about getting started and working through the lab. In the lab, we will be using just the commands that we've talked about in this video, with the exception of one additional command that is for you to look up and get comfortable working with the help files. You can use help, we already did, by just typing help and then the command you want help with. And then that will open up a file that you can navigate and learn more about. Additionally, the internet, Google, there's rich sources to help you navigate any additional questions that you might have. One thing to note is that when you're working through the lab, I'm going to need your written up answers to these questions, and I'm also going to need the log file that you create. If your log file gets really big, that's okay, you can still submit a big file. If you don't like it and it upsets you, you can also copy these things, pick out the commands you want, start a new log file, and rerun them. One thing I should have mentioned earlier, but I'm going to wrap up as a special treat if you're still there, is that with your logs, and this is noted up here, so please be careful about that, is that when you're done logging, is that noted? Maybe I didn't note it. Well, I'll tell you right now. When you're done logging, you got to type log close. All right? If you don't close your log, you can't necessarily open a new one. So we're going to close out by closing our log, and then we'll open a new one. If not, and you get stuck on that, let me know. But if you heard me tell you that, you probably won't get stuck. So have a wonderful time with this. Reach out with questions, and I will see you in class.